My life on drugs from, like I said, from an early age, glue sniffing, cannabis. I think my first I started injecting when I was about 17, amphetamines, and I would take anything and everything. And it's only when I reflect back at the time, I just thought I was doing it for a pleasure that was made me feel good and all the rest. And when I reflect on the word addiction, I sometimes think myself running away from rather than, because it's only now in later life that I'm fulfilled. I know who I am in Christ now, but then I didn't know, and whether it was my own insecurities, or I didn't think I was worth anything or not as good as anyone else, I tended to take drugs, and they made me feel better. I was more confident. I would do outrageous things, and people seemed to like that, and it was like I was living my life trying to please other people, because if I got sort of applauded by other people, that made me feel better as a person and all the rest of it. So drugs, I think the reason I was taking drugs was I was actually running away from myself, and I just felt worthless, like I had no self-worth as a person. Like I said, I never had much discipline as a child, so I never had no direction. I sort of went here, there and everywhere, the latest trend. I was a skinhead, I rode a scooter, and I was more of a gang type led person, football and all the rest of it. And I seemed to float along with the crowd, getting my sort of acclamation or self-satisfaction from other people, and drugs, and because I didn't know my own self-worth. I was in a very dark place at the time, because people got to remember, I had my first child when I was 18. I'd got someone pregnant. Because I wasn't fathered, I didn't know how to father. We was in bed and breakfast. I was taking more drugs to cope with the problems that came along, and more running away from facing the things that I should have faced and all the rest. I wasn't a good dad at all, especially, my daughter's in her 30s now, and we love each other very much. But I just didn't know. I was like a child growing into a man's body, but I was still very childlike, and I was using drugs to cope that. And I just, as my problems seemed to gain momentum, my drug taking just became worse and worse, because if I was out my head, I didn't have to face it. But the thing with drugs, you have to wake up the next morning and you still have the same problems that you had the night before when you was out your head. So when you wake up with that, your first thought is, oh, I need to take more drugs, and this, and whether you're self-consciously thinking that you've got problems or not, the deep-rooted things are you are running away, and there are problems there that you're trying to hide and run away from. So I was in a very, very dark place, and I must have been in my late teens, early 20s. There was no one in the house once, and I think I'd been awake 4 or 5 days on a real heavy drug binge, and the house was dark, and all I remember is smashing the house up and screaming, and poor old neighbours, they must have thought there was a demon in the house, because that's how I felt. I felt something had overwhelmed me, and I remember coming across a mirror, and it was the only thing I didn't smash. And I looked into that mirror and I said, if there was a God, why wouldn't you help me? Why am I different? Why can't you help me? So it's only on reflection I look back that God heard my cry, and it says in His Word, out of the depths I cried, and I can honestly say, unless you've been addicted on drugs to that extent, the depths that you go to, the darkest of darks, it's hard to explain, but that's where I was, and I don't know if I'd fell asleep or whatever, but a couple of weeks later I met a gentleman called Rob Hughes, and I was trying to get a methadone script, which is a heroin substitute, and he was the counsellor, and he got me on prescription, and all that, and he actually turned out to be a Christian, and he got me into a place in Hounslow. It was run by Yeldall Manor Drug Services, and it was in Hounslow, and it was a short-term drug rehabilitation centre, and I thought, oh, if I do that, my life would be perfect when I leave. It's only 3 months, and I went there for 3 months, and I was actually clean for 4. Come home, but I hadn't dealt with the deep-rooted issues. I hadn't, I was reading the Bible while I was there, but there was no foundation in the Lord. I wasn't, it was nice what I was reading, but I hadn't been touched by God as such.